Good morning, traders. It's Wednesday, November 5th. Hopefully everyone's had a good evening. Taking a look at the charts, we have equities a little bit mixed. We saw some continued selling last night in overnight trading. So the fear from yesterday, let's just go back and look at this a bit here. Take a look at the panic selling. So pretty much all day yesterday, it kept more or less pushing into panic selling territories. We saw a bunch of lows. If I just zoom this in a little bit, let's just zoom in on this chart. You can just see these short-term waves here in the market where we had panic selling right across here. The market opened, flushed down, and had that rebound. That was what we were expecting at the open. And then we continued to see downward pressure. The market got into another wave of panic selling. And then, of course, it pushed deeper into panic selling through most of the day and then closed with more panic. So there's a steady stream of selling. And we'll just have to see if it gets traction today. Now, it closed at 5. Typically, when we see it close at 7 or higher, it usually is a significant standout low on the chart, meaning it's hit a level of panic that a lot of people eject out of the markets, and then the market generally wants to go higher for several weeks. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. If we look at the futures chart here on the daily, you can see we have a little bit, let me get rid of this 150 day, it's squishing the chart. Hopefully this is an overnight little bit of a sell-off. So last night the market closed and then we saw this little bit of continued panic selling after the close, went down, and now it's rebounding and is trying to figure out if it's going to pop and move higher after most people really ejected out of the trade yesterday. We also talked about the cycle low that we had yesterday. In last night's update, we shared all these cycle lows. Last time we had a cycle low like that was right over here. We had a few of them going back in time when we went back. This was a cycle low. This here was a significant cycle low. So these are usually pretty standout cycle lows on the chart. And that's where we're at. We're at that tipping point. Is the market going to find a bottom and reverse because most people have been spooked out of the market, or is it the trend actually going to come to an end? So again, trends are most likely to continue than they are to reverse. That's why you don't want to try picking a top. As we go back in time, I showed you last time, we had all kinds of cycle lows on this chart. We had a cycle low, there was another one, there was I think one over here, or both of these. We had one here and here, we're at another one. So again, when you're in an uptrend, you'll have these cycle lows, you'll have these bouts of fear and pullbacks that you think the market's topping. But as you can see, every time we get into this wave of fear, the market rebounds and goes higher. So picking a top in an uptrend is a really poor decision because the odds are the market is going to go higher. Eventually, one of them will be a cycle low. If we go back over here, there'd be a cycle low. We had a cycle low right over here. But this cycle low ended up being the one that kind of, changed the trend. Eventually, a pullback will be a reversal, and you just don't know which one it is. But again, you can see these cycle lows happen for a long time, and price can just keep going up. So that's where we're at, and we just have to adjust, manage our positions as needed. So we'll see how that shakes out. Now, today we are seeing the small caps, the Russell 2000, trade slightly positive. Pretty much all the indices sold off after the close yesterday. I think we saw a lot of fear in overnight trading overseas continue to sell off, and it's trying to rebound. So this could be a bit of a reversal bar. And if we're lucky, the market wants to scream higher here. Most people have bailed out of the precious metal space who are going to bail out of it, the short-term traders. I think a lot of people have bailed out of the stock market. We saw that yesterday. It was a pretty broad market. People were fearful across the board, and they kind of sold everything. And that carried over in overnight trading. And now it's trying to stabilize. So I think today is a pretty critical potential pivot point in the market. I want to touch on something kind of funny and to also get some points across to those who skim thumbnails and things like that. So they've got some funny YouTube comments here. So there's one guy who's 153 people agree with this guy. This guy has correctly called 13 out of the last 2 bear markets. I think it's pretty awesome. But again, this just clearly goes to show people don't understand what I do. They're not grasping and really absorbing what I'm talking about, because I do have a perma-bear bias. I look at it, I'm a pilot, I have checklists. You always have to be ready for the unexpected, for something to break down. And one of the subscribers had a good example of it. It's like we're a kid in defensive driving school. We're told to check the mirrors every 3 to 5 seconds, always observe around you. And when you're driving or when you're in the markets, there are always a ton of issues that could blow up in your face at any moment. And so that's what I share with everybody. I show all the warning signs. This could happen. This could collapse. This is telling us there's problems ahead. And so that's what I always talk about. But again, we don't trade what I think or feel. We actually follow price. Another comment here. This one's great. This guy doesn't know his stuff. He was saying not to buy the week after Liberation Day. And I did clearly say that because it was, if we go and look at the charts, take a look at what happens after Liberation Day. So here's Liberation Day. We have all this volatility. Our strategy said to get out before the stock market crashed. And of course, people who say to get in and buy into this, picking the bottom, are bottom pickers. It's a losing strategy in the long run. Whoever tries to pick bottoms, they're also trying to pick tops, and you know how that works out. Overall, we did get in after Liberation Day. We don't buy into a volatility bounce. We wait for a bounce to turn into a legitimate rally. We don't trade on emotions. We don't have an ego trying to say I nailed the bottom, which in fact we did. I talked about this bottom, how we were going to have follow through over the weekend from this Friday close. We'll most likely see a big gap down and a flush out in the morning, and then from there it will be a massive significant low. Now, even though we called it and nailed it in terms of the analysis, we still don't get in until the trend proves itself, because it could have continued to collapse another 20, 30%, took 1, 5, 10 years to come back. And then anybody who tried to pick that bottom would look like a real meathead because they're trying to just pick a bottom. And that is a terrible strategy, because eventually when a bear market does hit, your bottom picking trade is going to become the worst trade of your life, and you're going to lose half of your wealth if you don't know how to manage it and get out of it quick enough. So long story short, if we take a look at this other comment from this other person, folks who listened to this guy missed out on a lot. And 71% people agree with that. And of course, the reality is we ride this market higher. And most people think we're not in the markets. Most people think we're missing out because we're bearish, have a bearish outlook, but we're actually long these markets when they go higher. It's simple green and red. We're either in equities or we're in something else that's going up, or back into equities. So I think a lot of this has to go from people who just skim through thumbnails. A perfect example here. A couple days ago, I said it's go time for gold and stocks. So thumbnail skimmers and trolls love to be like, oh, he says buy. And then the next day I say expect panic selling. And everybody jumps on and says, hey, you're such a flip-flopper. Now you're saying everybody's selling. Well, I do believe it's time for gold and stocks to find a bottom. The next day, the expect panic selling, if you actually watched the video and paid attention to it, you realize it's from a comment. We're expecting panic selling on our indicator, and for that day to show some short-term panic selling, which exactly what happened, as you'll see in this video. And then, of course, the next one is talking about the cycle lows. We have a cycle low. The market's oversold. We saw panic selling. We should start to see the market put a standout bottom here and start to rally. And so people obviously who just go off the thumbnails, I can't help you guys. You guys you don't put in the time and effort. You cut corners. And those of you who are dedicated to watching my channel, I do appreciate you guys. I know you support me and you help answer other people's comments and all of that stuff. You know the value is in the video. It's not the thumbnail. And the thumbnail, is really just, we need to put something up there. And it usually touches on one little comment I make. And of course, sometimes in a way, I almost throw up a thumbnail that will make people feel like it's flip-flopping, because I kind of want to keep those people away. The value's in the video, and those who are too shallow to dive in, I can't really help them anyway. So last night we were talking about the US dollar, how it's got these multiple bull flags. It keeps hitting its targets. The next target for the dollar is up at about another 1.2% to the upside at 101.26. That's just based on this most recent bull flag pattern. Again, if we look at the big picture of the dollar, this is the Canadian dollar for Canadians. This is what we've been talking about, how it's bottomed out long before the US dollar index itself, because the Canadian dollar keeps falling. It's screaming higher here. We talked about this pullback being a test of this rounding formation, this breakout. It had a little bit of a shakeout, and now it is moving higher. So it's, as Canadians, holding the US dollar is definitely a good play. You want to hold US dollars. You want to hold our stock ETFs in US ETFs, because not only do we get the benefit of the ETF going up in value, but the currency itself is also rising. And I think there's some pretty good potential, again, to the upside. The big picture, if I was to go way back here, the big picture for, it's not going to let me go back any further here with a free account, but long story short, there is potential here for the dollar and Canadian dollar to go all the way up to 173, which is absolutely ludicrous. We haven't seen that since way back in time, which maybe I could go back in the monthly chart. Let's just see here. No. Anyway, this is a pretty big pattern. Obviously, you've got the low, you've got these highs, then you've got this low, and that projects the 618, which is up here at 152, 153, and then the 100% measured move way up here. So that means the economies are falling apart. Everything's falling apart. Canadian economy is falling apart even faster, which I can see happening. It's just, yeah, we won't go there. But anyway, I think that the U.S. dollar will strengthen and the Canadian dollar will continue to collapse. And overall, this could be a very good play in terms of a currency play. Looking over at the metals, let's go take a look over at gold. Gold is finding both gold, bonds, and silver are slightly positive. So they are finding a little bit of a bid this morning. They open lower, but they're starting to bounce. So the fact that money's flowing out of gold, there's fear, out of stocks. There's kind of global fear, and people are moving into bonds. They're moving into gold, silver as a bit of a defensive play here. Again, they're still trying to struggle and find a bottom, gold and silver. Very similar chart patterns. If we go and take a look over at Bitcoin, it's up almost 2% this morning. Again, it's in that broadening formation. It could have a massive reversal and come to the upper end. That does not mean it's an opportunity. This could be a breakdown. This could be a rebound. Either way, it also could get jammed up right across in resistance through here. Again, I'm not a big fan of the Bitcoin chart at all. If we take a look over at crude oil, down 0.3%. It's trying to hold its ground here. Overall, I do think long term it's going to resolve to the downside. It's going to break these lows here around, if I can get this to draw, it's going to break its lows around the 55 level, and eventually have a big breakdown. You can see the big bouts of selling. Look at the red bars on volume. There's definitely some unloading of shares or contracts at points. There's big bouts, and of course it's continuously going down. It's hit this support level 3 times now. Maybe the 4th time's a charm that it actually breaks down. That would probably mean the economy is slowing. Some bad economic data. We'll just have to see how that unfolds. Now, if we just step back and look at the big picture, this is the weekly chart of the S&P 500. This is our TTI strategy telling us when we are in a bullish environment, when we need to be protective and move to the sidelines. And again, we are back into a bullish environment. And when you look at price just really channeling up here, it's very contained. This is a stair-step, move to the upside. The pullback this week doesn't really mean a whole lot in the grand scheme of things. As you can see within a bull market, you can have much larger pullbacks, huge pullbacks compared to what we've seen over the last little bit here. So again, the long-term trend is still intact, and if anything, the trend may come to an end short-term wise as the market tries to stabilize and figure itself out. But as a long-term investor, we're still in a bullish environment to the upside. Now, if we take a look at the Magnificent Seven, we had a lot of people get involved in the Magnificent Seven up here. You can see the volume. And then eventually, usually when the masses kind of pile in all in one kind of window, usually the market's going to apply some pain to them. And we saw that pain with the tariffs. We saw all this unfold, ramped up to capitulation, put in this huge bounce that then turned into a rally, which we are still in that rally at this point. And if we take a look at the recent price action, you can see we obviously have a bunch of big red bars, standout bars, telling us there's definitely some big money slowly trimming back their portfolios, dumping some big blocks of shares in the Magnificent Seven to slowly trim back positions because they're worried the market is going to collapse. So there's some signs of distribution selling these spikes. But again, it doesn't mean it's going to top. A lot of people will be trimming profits just like we do. As things move up, you pull back, you trim, you adjust your target, your stops. It's all about managing positions, and that's what these people are doing, these big institutions, when they do that. And right now the trend remains up, but we'll just have to see how this unfolds going forward. And I'll touch on TLT real quick because I don't touch on it every day, and everybody's always like, you skip TLT. So anyways, TLT's had a nice pullback. It is trying to find support around the 50-day. Let's just zoom in a bit here. It's settling down into this support level also where it pulled back and had this level. Again, it has a series of higher lows, has a series of higher highs. So it's in an uptrend. In the grand scheme of things, the big picture, when we zoom way out, obviously it's still in a long-term downtrend. It's trying to carve out a bottom. I do think it's getting darn close. And there's some more work to be done. But again, it's not quite on our radar yet to start trading it as an investment. When the stock market falls out of favor, we generally move into TLT as long as it meets our trend criteria, and it can do very well. The stock market might trade sideways for 5 or 10 or 20 days, and TLT can move up 2, 3, 4, 5% very easily in many cases and provide that opportunity. But it's still struggling in this long-term downtrend. But again, bonds are carving out a bottom. They look like they're in a bottoming formation. So those holding TLT, I think, are going to be okay, but it still could be a wild ride, and it could take a lot of time. That's the one thing that I focus on trying not to waste. We don't want to buy something. I know a lot of people bought into TLT here, a huge amount bought in over here. And then people have accumulated really through this whole phase. Now just keep in mind, look at the time on the bottom here, right? We're talking like years of just holding a position that's underwater or at the same value you bought it, and it's not really doing much. It is paying some dividends. There's no doubt you are collecting that, but you have downside risk if this was to collapse. You could just sit in cash and make the same amount of money without the risk. So that's what I focus on. I don't want us to get into something and hold on to it for years and have exposure to downside risk if for some reason, interest rates were to start to go up and bonds fall apart and trust, leaves the bond market and we see things fall. So there are different ways to, play. If bonds aren't in favor, sometimes just cash, earning that 4.25%, whatever, is with no downside risk really is much better than holding on to this and knowing it could drop 8% or more at any point. Anyways, thanks for the nice comments about my shepherd's pie. It was amazing. It tasted way better than a normal one with that crispy, buttery pastry there. But I know, John, you said you got cards night coming up and you want the recipe. So next time I do it, I'll measure things out. I know exactly how I make it, but I don't know the exact measurements because it does have a really good flavor. The kids just go nuts. So do I. That's why I make it. So you got to love kids. So the other night we had a games night at our house, and my son, Ben, took our phone, and this is the string of messages thinking that this is my daughter, Mirabelle. She was in town at her friend's house, Claire, and Ben had stolen my wife's phone and is replying back to Mirabelle, pretending he's obviously her mom. And Mirabelle says, "Can I go to Toronto with Claire tomorrow at lunch?" Of course, Ben says no. She goes, "Why? Please? It's a little harsh, don't you think?" He goes, "Haha, no, it's not. You're not going, Mirabelle." "What?" "English, please. You're not going." "So can I go?" "When you get home, you're in deep trouble." "Okay, I'm not going tomorrow. I told Claire." "Okay, bye." "See you." "When you get home tomorrow, you're in deep trouble." What did I do? You know what you have done. Don't play this game with me. I literally have no idea. You know what you did. Oh my God, Ben sent these messages. You just gotta love it. But hey, that is too funny. Just priceless. Anyways, talk soon. Take care.